My name is Beverly and I'm 30 years old. I work as a nurse at the local hospital and most people in my family think that's all I do. What they don't know is that I also serve as a colonel in the Army Reserve, something I've kept secret for years. Growing up in the small town of Maplewood Heights, I was always the quiet one in my family. My younger sister Jessica was the golden child, beautiful, popular, and could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. She got the best clothes, the nicest room, and all the attention at family gatherings. Meanwhile, I was expected to be grateful for whatever scraps were left over. When I turned 18, I joined the Army Reserve to pay for nursing school. It was hard work, but I loved the discipline and structure. Over the years, I worked my way up through the ranks, earning respect and recognition that I never got at home. But I kept it secret because I knew my family would find some way to make it about Jessica or dismiss it entirely. Jessica grew up spoiled and entitled. She never worked a real job, always had boyfriends paying for everything, and expected the world to revolve around her. When she announced her engagement to David, a successful lawyer from the city, our parents went completely overboard with excitement. They immediately started planning what they called the wedding of the century. The problem was, they expected me to pay for half of it. "Beverly, you make good money as a nurse," my mother said during one of our family dinners. "Jessica's wedding is going to cost about $40,000, and we think you should contribute $20,000 as your sister's maid of honor." I nearly choked on my food. $20,000 was a lot of money, even for someone with my military salary that they didn't know about. But what made it worse was that they just assumed I would pay without even asking if I could afford it. "Mom, that's a lot of money," I said carefully. "Can't we have a smaller wedding?" Jessica threw her fork down dramatically. "Are you seriously trying to ruin my special day? This is supposed to be perfect, and you're being selfish as usual." My father nodded in agreement. "Beverly, your sister only gets married once. You can afford it, and it's the least you can do for family." The least I could do? I had been doing things for this family my whole life while getting nothing in return. I had helped pay for Jessica's car, her college textbooks, and even her spring break trips. Every time it was presented as helping family, but the help only seemed to flow in one direction. Over the next few months, the wedding planning became a nightmare. Jessica wanted everything to be expensive and over the top. She picked a venue that cost $15,000 just for the space. The flowers were another $5,000. Her dress cost $3,000, and she insisted on having a destination bachelorette party in Miami that cost each bridesmaid $2,000. Every time I tried to suggest something less expensive, I was shot down. "You're just jealous because you'll never have a wedding like this," Jessica would say. "Stop trying to make my day cheap and pathetic." The worst part was how they treated me during the planning process. I was expected to do all the work, calling vendors, making appointments, picking up supplies, but I had no say in any of the decisions. When I suggested a beautiful but affordable photographer, Jessica laughed and said, "I'm not having some amateur ruin my wedding photos because you're too cheap to hire a real professional." Meanwhile, our parents praised Jessica for every little thing she did. When she picked out overpriced centerpieces, Mom gushed about her incredible taste. When she chose a band that cost $8,000, Dad said she knew quality when she saw it. But when I worked overtime at the hospital to earn extra money for their wedding, no one even noticed. The breaking point came 3 weeks before the wedding. I had just finished a particularly difficult shift at the hospital and was exhausted. When I got home, I found 15 missed calls from Jessica and a series of angry text messages. "Where are you? We have a crisis. The wedding planner quit. This is all your fault. If you weren't so difficult to work with, this wouldn't have happened." I called her back immediately. "What happened with the wedding planner?" She said we were too demanding and that our budget expectations were unrealistic, Jessica said, her voice shaking with anger. "But I think you said something to her about money. Did you tell her we couldn't afford things? Jessica, I never even talked to her about money. She worked directly with you and Mom. Well, someone scared her off, and now my wedding is ruined. You need to find us a new planner by tomorrow, or I'm never speaking to you again. I spent the entire next day calling every wedding planner in the area. Most of them were already booked, and the few who were available wanted to charge extra for such short notice. When I finally found someone willing to take on the job, she wanted an additional $5,000 because of the rushed timeline. When I told Jessica about the extra cost, she exploded. Are you kidding me? That's ridiculous. You need to negotiate with her and get it for less. Jessica! She's already doing us a favor by taking this on so close to the wedding date. Her price is fair. I don't care. You're supposed to be handling this stuff. If you can't get her to lower the price, then you need to pay the extra $5,000 yourself. That was the moment I realized just how little my family thought of me. They saw me as nothing more than a bank account and a personal assistant. They had no respect for my time, my money, or my feelings. All that mattered was making Jessica's day perfect, no matter what it cost me. But I had a plan brewing in my mind. A plan that would show them exactly who they had been treating so poorly. They thought I was just a simple nurse who would quietly pay for everything and fade into the background. They had no idea what was coming. As I hung up the phone after Jessica's latest tantrum, I smiled for the first time in weeks. My family was about to learn that you should never underestimate someone or treat them like they don't matter. The wedding was still 2 weeks away, and I had just enough time to arrange something special, something that would change everything forever. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. While my family saw me as their personal ATM, they had no idea about my real life or the respect I had earned outside of Maplewood Heights. I decided it was time to start laying the groundwork for what would happen at Jessica's wedding. I started by making some phone calls to my military contacts. My commanding officer, General Patricia Reynolds, had always been supportive of my dual career as a nurse and reserve officer. When I explained my situation, she was more than willing to help with my plan. Beverly, you've served this country with honor for 12 years, she said over the phone. Your family should be proud of what you've accomplished, not treating you like hired help. Let me know what you need. I also reached out to some of my fellow officers who I had served with during my deployment in Afghanistan 3 years ago. We had been through hell together, and they were like my real family, the family that actually valued and respected me. When I told them about the wedding situation, they were outraged on my behalf. Are you serious? Said Lieutenant Colonel Rachel Morgan, who had been my second in command during our deployment. They don't even know you're a colonel? Beverly, you saved lives over there. You earned a Bronze Star for courage under fire. How can they not know any of this? The truth was, I had tried to tell them about my military service over the years, but they always dismissed it or changed the subject back to Jessica. When I came home from Afghanistan, instead of asking about my experiences, my mother's first question was whether I had met any nice doctors at the military hospital who might want to date Jessica. Over the next week, I continued to play the role of the obedient older sister while secretly preparing for the wedding surprise. I paid the extra $5,000 for the new wedding planner without complaint, even though it meant dipping into my savings. I smiled and nodded when Jessica criticized my bridesmaid dress choice, saying it made me look frumpy and old. I even agreed to give a toast at the reception, knowing it would be the perfect opportunity for my plan. The wedding planning chaos continued to escalate. Jessica changed her mind about the flowers 3 times, each time picking something more expensive. She decided she needed a second dress for the reception, adding another $2,500 to the budget. When the original cake decorator said he couldn't make the elaborate 5-tier cake she wanted, she insisted I find someone else, even though it meant paying $3,000 more. This is supposed to be the most important day of my life, she said when I hesitated about the cake cost. If you really cared about me, you wouldn't question spending money on making it perfect. My parents continued to enable her behavior. When I suggested that maybe some of the expenses were getting out of hand, my father pulled me aside for a talk. Beverly, I know the wedding costs are high, but Jessica deserves this. She's always been our princess, and David comes from a wealthy family. We need to make sure this wedding reflects well on our family. You understand, don't you? What I understood was that they cared more about impressing David's family than about the financial burden they were putting on me. They wanted to look like they could afford this lavish wedding, even though I was the one actually paying for most of it. The week before the wedding, I made my final preparations. I arranged for some very special guests to attend the ceremony, guests that my family would never expect to see. I also made sure my dress uniform was perfectly pressed and ready. My family thought I would be wearing the bridesmaid dress Jessica had chosen, but I had other plans. 3 days before the wedding, disaster struck again. The venue called to say there had been a plumbing problem and the main reception hall was flooded. They could offer us a smaller room, but it would only hold half the guests Jessica had invited. This is a catastrophe. Jessica screamed when she heard the news. My wedding is ruined. You have to fix this, Beverly. I don't care what it costs or what you have to do. I spent the entire day calling every venue in the area, trying to find somewhere that could accommodate 200 guests on such short notice. Finally, I found a country club that had a cancellation, but they wanted $25,000 for the space, more than double what we had originally budgeted. When I told Jessica about the price, she didn't even blink. Book it. I'm not having my wedding in some cramped little room. David's family would be horrified. Jessica, that's $25,000. That's more than most people make in half a year. So what? You can afford it. Stop being dramatic and just pay for it. That night, I sat in my apartment looking at my bank account. Between the original wedding costs and all the emergencies and changes, I had spent over $45,000 on Jessica's wedding. That was money I had saved from years of military service and overtime shifts at the hospital. Money I had planned to use for a down payment on a house. But I wasn't angry anymore. I was excited because in 2 days my family was going to learn exactly who they had been taking advantage of. They were going to discover that the simple nurse they had been treating like a servant was actually a decorated military officer who had earned the respect of her peers and superiors. The night before the wedding, I got a call from my commanding officer. Beverly, everything is set for tomorrow. Are you sure you want to go through with this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, I replied. The morning of the wedding arrived bright and sunny. I woke up early and put on my bridesmaid dress as expected, but I had my dress uniform hanging in my car. Jessica was in full panic mode, calling me every 10 minutes with new demands and complaints. Beverly, the flowers look wrong. They're not the right shade of pink. Beverly, the photographer is late. This is going to ruin everything. Beverly, I can't find my backup lipstick. You need to go buy me a new one right now. I handled each crisis calmly, knowing that in a few hours, the dynamic between us would change forever. My family had no idea that some very important people would be attending the wedding, or that their simple nurse daughter was about to reveal her true identity. As I stood in the church getting ready for the ceremony to begin, I felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. This was it. After years of being treated like I didn't matter, I was finally going to show my family who I really was. The wedding march began to play, and I took my place at the altar as Jessica's maid of honor. She looked beautiful in her expensive dress, smiling radiantly as she walked down the aisle toward David. Our parents beamed with pride, clearly thinking this was the pinnacle of their success as a family. But as Jessica reached the altar and the ceremony began, I noticed something that made my heart race. In the back of the church, I could see some familiar faces beginning to arrive. Men and women in dress uniforms, their chests decorated with ribbons and medals. My military family was here, just as we had planned. The ceremony proceeded normally, with Jessica and David exchanging vows and rings. But I could see the confusion starting to spread through the congregation as more and more military personnel filed into the back rows. People began whispering and pointing, wondering who these important-looking people were and why they were at Jessica's wedding. My parents looked puzzled, and I saw my mother lean over to whisper something to my father. They had no idea that these decorated officers were here for me, not Jessica. They probably assumed David had some military connections through his law firm. As the ceremony concluded and we moved to the reception, I felt my phone buzzing with text messages from my military colleagues. They were all in position, ready for the surprise that would change everything. The reception began with dinner and dancing, and everything seemed to be going perfectly from Jessica's perspective. She was the center of attention, dancing with David and accepting congratulations from all the guests. My parents were glowing with pride, clearly feeling that they had successfully pulled off the wedding of the century. But I knew that was about to change. As the evening progressed and it came time for the toasts, I stood up with my glass of champagne, ready to deliver the speech that would reveal the truth about who I really was. Just as I was about to speak, the doors to the reception hall burst open. A group of military police officers in full dress uniform marched in, followed by General Reynolds herself. The entire room fell silent as these imposing figures made their way toward the head table. My family's faces went white with shock and confusion. Jessica grabbed David's arm, looking terrified. "What's happening?" she whispered loudly. "Why are there military people here?" The general approached our table with a stern expression on her face, her eyes scanning the room before settling on me. The silence was deafening as 200 wedding guests held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. General Reynolds stood at attention in front of our table, her uniform impeccable and her presence commanding the attention of every single person in the room. The wedding guests sat in stunned silence, their champagne glasses frozen halfway to their lips as they tried to understand what was happening. "Ladies and gentlemen," General Reynolds announced in her clear, authoritative voice, "I apologize for interrupting this celebration, but I have an urgent matter to address with one of the members of the wedding party." My family looked absolutely terrified. Jessica's face had gone completely pale, and she was gripping David's hand so tightly her knuckles were white. My parents sat frozen in their chairs, probably thinking someone was in terrible trouble or that there had been some kind of mistake. "I'm looking for Colonel Beverly Martinez," the general continued, her eyes scanning the head table. "I have an important military matter to discuss with her." The room erupted in confused whispers. People began looking around, trying to figure out who this Colonel Martinez could be. I could hear guests murmuring things like, "Did she say Colonel?" and "I don't see any military officers here except the ones who just walked in." My mother leaned over to my father and whispered loudly enough for me to hear, "There must be some mistake. Beverly's just a nurse. She doesn't know any colonels." Jessica looked directly at me with panic in her eyes. "Beverly, do you know what this is about? Are you in some kind of trouble? Is this going to ruin my wedding?" I stood up slowly, my heart pounding, but my voice steady. "Actually, Jessica, I think there's been a misunderstanding." I looked directly at General Reynolds and said, "I'm Colonel Beverly Martinez, ma'am. You said you needed to speak with me." The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a pin drop. Every single person in that room was staring at me with their mouths open, trying to process what they had just heard. My family looked like they had seen a ghost. "That's impossible," my mother said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Beverly, what are you talking about? You're a nurse, not a colonel." General Reynolds smiled and saluted me. "Colonel Martinez, I have some exciting news to share with you and your family. Your promotion to Brigadier General has been approved by the Pentagon. Congratulations on your advancement." The room exploded. Guests began talking excitedly, some of them standing up to get a better look at what was happening. I could hear people saying things like, "She's a general," and "I had no idea she was in the military." but my family's reaction was very different. They sat in shocked silence, their faces cycling through confusion, disbelief, and what looked like embarrassment. Jessica's perfect wedding moment was completely forgotten as everyone's attention focused on me. "I don't understand," my father said, his voice shaking. "Beverly, how long have you been in the military? Why didn't you tell us?" Before I could answer, Lieutenant Colonel Morgan stepped forward from the crowd of military personnel. "Sir, Colonel Martinez has been serving with distinction for 12 years. She's one of the most respected officers in her unit." Another officer, Major James Patterson, joined the conversation. "Colonel Martinez saved 6 lives during our deployment in Afghanistan. She performed emergency surgery under enemy fire and received the Bronze Star for her courage." The wedding guests were now completely captivated by this revelation. They began applauding, and several people approached me to shake my hand and offer congratulations. Meanwhile, my family sat at the head table looking absolutely mortified. Jessica finally found her voice. "Beverly, this is my wedding day. Why are you trying to steal attention from me? This is supposed to be about me and David." The room fell silent again, and I could see the shock on people's faces at Jessica's reaction. Here I was being honored for my military service, and my sister was complaining that it was taking attention away from her wedding. General Reynolds looked at Jessica with a raised eyebrow. "Miss, your sister is a war hero. She has dedicated her life to serving our country while also working as a nurse to help people in her community. Perhaps you should be proud of her accomplishments." My mother tried to smooth things over. "Of course we're proud of Beverly. We just didn't know about her military service. She never mentioned it." "That's not true, Mom," I said quietly. "I tried to tell you many times over the years. When I came back from Afghanistan, I wanted to share my experiences with you. But every time I brought up the military, you changed the subject or found a way to make it about Jessica." The truth was starting to come out, and I could see the discomfort on my parents' faces. They were beginning to realize how badly they had treated me, and it was all happening in front of 200 wedding guests. Major Patterson spoke up again. "Colonel Martinez told us that her family didn't know about her military service. We were surprised because she's accomplished so much. She's not just a colonel. She's also completed 3 tours of duty and has been instrumental in training new medical officers." One of the wedding guests, an elderly man I recognized as David's grandfather, stood up and approached me. "Young lady, I served in Vietnam, and I want to thank you for your service. You should be very proud of what you've accomplished." More guests began coming forward to congratulate me and thank me for my service. I was overwhelmed by their kindness and respect, something I had never received from my own family. Meanwhile, Jessica sat at the head table looking furious that her wedding had been overshadowed. "This is ridiculous," she said loudly. "Beverly, you planned this whole thing to ruin my wedding, didn't you? You couldn't stand that I was having a perfect day, so you had to make it about yourself." The accusation hung in the air like a dark cloud. Several guests gasped, clearly shocked by Jessica's selfishness. Even David looked embarrassed by his new wife's behavior. General Reynolds stepped forward with a stern expression. "Miss, your sister did not plan this promotion. The Pentagon makes these decisions based on merit and service record. Colonel Martinez earned this advancement through years of dedicated service to our country. But Jessica wasn't finished. I don't care about any of that. This is supposed to be the most important day of my life, and she's ruining it. She's always been jealous of me, and now she's trying to upstage me at my own wedding." The room was now completely silent except for Jessica's voice. I could see the horror on people's faces as they realized what kind of person the bride really was. Here was a decorated military officer being honored for her service, and the bride was complaining about it stealing her spotlight. My father tried to intervene. "Jessica, maybe we should discuss this later. Let's not make a scene at your wedding." But the damage was already done. The guests had seen Jessica's true character and they were not impressed. I could see people whispering to each other and shaking their heads in disapproval. That's when David's father, a respected judge in the city, stood up and addressed the room. I think we all need to take a step back and recognize what's really important here. Beverly, we're honored to have a hero like you in our family now. Your service to our country is remarkable. He paused and looked directly at Jessica. And Jessica, I think you owe your sister an apology. This is a moment to celebrate her achievements, not to complain about attention being taken away from you. The tension in the room was thick as everyone waited to see how Jessica would respond. But instead of apologizing, she stood up and glared at me with pure hatred in her eyes. You know what, Beverly? You can keep your stupid military career. I hope you're happy that you've ruined my wedding. This was supposed to be perfect, and you've destroyed everything. She turned to storm out of the reception hall. But as she spun around, her elaborate wedding dress caught on the edge of the table. The whole thing came crashing down, sending plates, glasses, and the expensive wedding cake flying across the floor. The beautiful 5-tier cake that had cost $6,000 splattered across the marble floor in a mess of frosting and broken decorations. Jessica stood in the middle of the chaos, her wedding dress stained with cake and her face red with embarrassment and rage. The room erupted in gasps and shocked murmurs as everyone stared at the destruction. But this was just the beginning of what would become the most dramatic moment of the entire evening. Jessica stood in the middle of the cake disaster, her expensive wedding dress covered in frosting and crumbs. Her face was bright red with embarrassment as she looked around the room at all the shocked faces staring at her. The beautiful reception hall looked like a war zone, with broken plates and glass scattered across the floor. "This is all your fault," she screamed at me, pointing her finger accusingly. "You planned this whole thing to humiliate me. You're nothing but a jealous, pathetic loser who can't stand to see me happy." The wedding guests were completely stunned by her outburst. David looked mortified as he tried to help clean frosting off his new wife's dress. My parents sat frozen in their chairs, clearly not knowing how to handle the situation. General Reynolds maintained her composure despite the chaos. "Colonel Martinez, perhaps we should continue this conversation at a more appropriate time. I can see that emotions are running high." But I had kept quiet for too long. Years of being treated like a second-class citizen in my own family had built up inside me, and I was finally ready to speak my truth. "No, General Reynolds, I think now is the perfect time," I said, standing up and facing my family. "Jessica, you want to know the truth? I didn't plan any of this. The military doesn't coordinate promotions around wedding dates. But you're right about one thing. I am tired of being treated like I don't matter." I looked around the room at all the faces watching me. For 12 years, I've served my country with honor. I've saved lives, been deployed to dangerous places, and earned the respect of my fellow officers. But my own family has never once asked about my military service or shown any interest in what I do. My mother tried to interrupt. "Beverly, that's not true. We've always been proud of you." "Really, Mom? When I came back from Afghanistan, the first thing you asked was whether I had met any doctors who might want to date Jessica. When I tried to tell you about my experiences overseas, you changed the subject to Jessica's latest boyfriend. When I was promoted to major, you forgot about it completely because Jessica had gotten a new job at the mall." The room was completely silent except for my voice. I could see some of the guests nodding in agreement, understanding what I had been going through. "And this wedding," I continued, "I've spent over $45,000 of my own money to make Jessica's dreams come true. Money I saved from years of military service and working overtime at the hospital. Money I was planning to use for a down payment on a house." David's father looked shocked. $45,000? That's an enormous amount of money for one person to spend on someone else's wedding. "But it wasn't just about the money," I said, my voice getting stronger. "Every time there was a problem, I was expected to fix it. Every time something went wrong, it was my fault. I was treated like a personal assistant and a bank account, not like a sister or a daughter. Jessica finally found her voice again. You're being dramatic, Beverly. We never forced you to pay for anything. You chose to help because you're family. I chose to help because I love you, Jessica. But love should go both ways. When was the last time you asked how I was doing? When was the last time you showed interest in my life? When was the last time you thanked me for anything I've done for you? The questions hung in the air unanswered. Jessica looked around desperately for support, but even David seemed to be realizing what kind of person he had married. Major Patterson stepped forward. If I may, Colonel Martinez has told us about her family situation. She's mentioned feeling unappreciated and taken for granted. We encouraged her to tell you about her military service because we felt you should know what an extraordinary person you have in your family. My father finally spoke up. Beverly, why didn't you tell us you felt this way? We would have listened. Dad, I tried to tell you many times, but every conversation somehow became about Jessica and her needs. Even now, on the day I'm being promoted to general, Jessica is angry that it's taking attention away from her. The wedding guests were now murmuring among themselves, clearly taking sides in the family drama. I could hear comments like, "The poor girl has been treated terribly," and "I can't believe they didn't know she was a war hero." David's mother approached me with tears in her eyes. Beverly, I want to apologize on behalf of my family. We had no idea what you had sacrificed for this wedding or what you've accomplished in your military career. You should be celebrated, not taken for granted. Her kindness was overwhelming after years of being dismissed by my own family. I felt tears starting to form in my eyes, but I fought them back. I needed to stay strong for what came next. There's something else you all need to know, I said, looking directly at my parents. I've been keeping track of every dollar I've spent on this family over the years. The car payments for Jessica's BMW, the spring break trips, the college textbooks, the credit card bills I've paid. It adds up to over $80,000. The room gasped. Even I was surprised by how much it sounded when I said it out loud. $80,000, my mother whispered. Beverly, that can't be right. I have all the receipts and bank statements, Mom. I can show you exactly where every penny went. And not once did anyone in this family ask if I could afford it or if I needed help with anything. Jessica was now sitting in a chair, her ruined wedding dress spread around her like a deflated balloon. She looked smaller somehow, as if the weight of her selfishness was finally hitting her. I thought you were happy to help, she said quietly. I thought you wanted to take care of me because you're my big sister. I did want to take care of you, Jessica. But taking care of someone doesn't mean letting them walk all over you. It doesn't mean sacrificing your own dreams and goals so they can have everything they want. The room was now completely focused on our family drama. The wedding celebration had been forgotten as everyone watched this painful, truth-telling session unfold. David cleared his throat nervously. Beverly, I want you to know that I had no idea about any of this. If I had known how much you were spending or how you were being treated, I would have said something. I know, David, this isn't your fault, but I hope you understand now what kind of family you've married into. My words hit like a slap across the face. My parents looked devastated, and Jessica began to cry. But I wasn't finished yet. I've made a decision, I announced to the room. I'm done being the family bank account. I'm done being taken for granted. And I'm done pretending that this treatment is normal or acceptable. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder of documents. These are copies of all the money I've spent on this family over the years. Every loan, every gift, every emergency payment. I'm treating them all as loans from now on, and I expect to be paid back. The folder landed on the table with a thud, and my parents stared at it like it was a bomb about to explode. You want us to pay you back? My father asked incredulously. Beverly, that money was given freely as family help. No, Dad. That money was taken from me because you all assumed I would always be there to solve your problems. Well, I'm not going to be your solution anymore. Just then, my phone began ringing loudly. I looked at the caller ID and saw it was my commanding officer's emergency line. This was highly unusual, especially during a personal event like a wedding. "I need to take this," I said, answering the phone. "Colonel Martinez here." The voice on the other end was urgent and official. "Colonel Martinez, we have a situation that requires your immediate attention. There's been an incident at the base, and we need you to report for duty immediately." The room watched in silence as I handled the call with military precision. When I hung up, I looked around at my family and the wedding guests. "I have to go," I announced. "There's an emergency at the base that requires my immediate attention." Jessica looked panicked. "You can't leave. The wedding isn't over yet. What about the rest of the reception?" I looked at my sister, still sitting in her ruined wedding dress, surrounded by cake crumbs, and felt a mixture of sadness and determination. "Jessica, my country needs me. That's something you've never understood and probably never will." As I turned to leave, something happened that would change everything forever. The main doors to the reception hall burst open again. And this time it wasn't more military personnel. It was the local news crew, their cameras rolling and microphones ready. Behind them was the mayor of our town, along with what appeared to be several other important officials. "We're here to interview the local war hero," the news reporter announced to the stunned crowd. "We understand that Colonel Beverly Martinez, who is being promoted to Brigadier General, is here tonight. This is a historic moment for our community." The cameras began rolling, capturing the destroyed reception hall, my family's shocked faces, and me standing there in my bridesmaid dress, ready to leave for a military emergency. This was about to become much bigger than just a family drama. The whole town was about to learn the truth about what had happened here tonight. The news cameras swept across the destroyed reception hall, capturing every detail of the chaos. Broken plates and wedding cake were scattered across the marble floor, while my family sat frozen in their chairs like deer caught in headlights. The reporter, a professional-looking woman named Linda Chin, approached me with her microphone extended. "Brigadier General Martinez, we're here to congratulate you on your promotion and to ask you about your years of service to our country," she said with a bright smile. "Our viewers would love to hear about your experiences as both a military officer and a local nurse." I could see the panic in my family's eyes as they realized this was being broadcast live to the entire town. Jessica looked absolutely horrified, still sitting in her cake-covered wedding dress, while my parents tried to discreetly clean up the mess around them. "Thank you, Linda," I said, maintaining my composure despite the chaos surrounding us. "I've been honored to serve both my country and my community for the past 12 years. The reporter glanced around at the destruction and confusion. "It looks like we've interrupted a celebration. Are you celebrating your promotion with your family tonight?" Before I could answer, Mayor Johnson stepped forward. "Actually, we're here because the city council wanted to present Brigadier General Martinez with a key to the city. Her service record is truly exceptional, and we felt it was important to recognize her contributions to our community." The mayor pulled out an ornate golden key and held it up for the cameras. "Brigadier General Martinez, on behalf of the entire city of Maplewood Heights, I present you with this key to the city in recognition of your outstanding military service and your dedication to helping others as a nurse at our local hospital." The remaining wedding guests began applauding enthusiastically, clearly impressed by this unexpected honor. But I could see my family's faces growing more embarrassed by the minute as they realized how significant my achievements were and how poorly they had treated me. "General Martinez," the reporter continued, "can you tell us about your most recent deployment and what this promotion means to you?" I looked directly into the camera, knowing that everyone in town was watching. My most recent deployment was to Afghanistan, where I served as a medical officer treating wounded soldiers. This promotion represents years of hard work and dedication, but more importantly, it represents the trust that the United States Army has placed in me to lead and serve. Jessica suddenly stood up, still covered in wedding cake, and tried to get into the camera frame. "Excuse me, this is actually my wedding reception. I'm Jessica Martinez Davidson, and today is supposed to be about me and my husband David." The reporter looked confused by this interruption. "Oh, I'm sorry. Are you celebrating your wedding and your sister's promotion at the same time? How wonderful that these two happy occasions coincided." "No," Jessica said firmly, "this is my wedding day. Beverly's military thing is just a coincidence. She's been trying to steal attention from me all evening." The silence that followed was deafening. I could see the shock on the reporter's face, and the camera operator actually zoomed in on Jessica's cake-covered dress and the destruction around us. The mayor looked absolutely appalled by what he was witnessing. "I see," the reporter said carefully. "And how do you feel about your sister's military service and her promotion to general?" Jessica looked directly into the camera with anger in her eyes. "I think she planned this whole thing to ruin my wedding. She's always been jealous of me, and she couldn't stand that I was having a perfect day." The wedding guests began murmuring in shock and disapproval. David grabbed Jessica's arm and tried to pull her away from the camera. "Jessica, please stop talking. You're making this worse." But Jessica pulled away from him. "No, David, I'm tired of everyone acting like Beverly is some kind of hero. She's just a nurse who happens to be in the military. My wedding cost $45,000, and it's been completely ruined because of her stupid promotion." The reporter's eyebrows shot up. "Did you say $45,000? That's quite an expensive wedding for a small town." "Yes, and Beverly paid for most of it because she's my sister and she's supposed to take care of me. But then she invited all these military people to upstage me on my special day." I could see the horror on people's faces as they realized what Jessica was saying. She was admitting on live television that I had paid for her wedding and that she was upset about my military honor stealing her spotlight. The mayor stepped forward, looking disgusted. "Miss, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Your sister is a war hero who has served our country with distinction. She saved lives in Afghanistan and has been promoted to one of the highest ranks in the military. This is something our entire community should be proud of." My mother finally found her voice and tried to do damage control. "I think there's been some confusion. We're very proud of Beverly's military service. We're just surprised because she never told us about it." The reporter turned to my parents. "She never told you about her military service? How is that possible?" My father looked extremely uncomfortable. "Well, Beverly mentioned it a few times over the years, but we didn't realize it was such a big deal. We thought it was just a part-time job." "A part-time job?" the reporter repeated incredulously. "Sir, your daughter is a brigadier general. She's been deployed to combat zones and has saved countless lives. How could you not know about her Bronze Star or her years of service?" The truth was now coming out on live television for the entire town to see. My family's neglect and dismissal of my achievements was being broadcast to thousands of viewers, and they were beginning to realize how terrible they looked. David's father, the respected judge, stepped in front of the camera. "I want to make something clear. I've just learned tonight about Beverly's military service and the sacrifices she's made for this family. Her sister and parents have treated her shamefully, and I want to publicly apologize on behalf of anyone who has failed to recognize her contributions." Jessica looked absolutely furious at this betrayal from her new father-in-law. "You don't know what you're talking about. Beverly has always been difficult and jealous. She's the one who ruined my wedding." Just then, General Reynolds approached the news crew. "If I may interrupt, I'd like to say something about Brigadier General Martinez." The reporter immediately turned the microphone toward her. "Of course, General. Please tell us about Beverly's service record." "Brigadier General Martinez is one of the most outstanding officers I've ever had the privilege to serve with. During her deployment in Afghanistan, she performed emergency surgery on wounded soldiers while under enemy fire. She saved 6 lives that day and received the Bronze Star for her courage under fire. The camera panned across the faces of my family members, capturing their shocked expressions as they learned about my military honors for the first time. She has also been instrumental in training new medical officers and has volunteered countless hours to help veterans transition back to civilian life. The promotion to Brigadier General is richly deserved and long overdue. The reporter turned back to me. General Martinez, how does it feel to have your military service recognized publicly when your own family didn't seem to know about your achievements? I took a deep breath and looked directly into the camera. It's been painful to feel unappreciated by the people who should love and support you most. But I've learned that you can't force people to value you. You have to find your worth in the work you do and the lives you touch. I paused and looked at my family. I hope this experience teaches everyone the importance of treating the people in your life with respect and gratitude. You never know what someone else is going through or what they've accomplished. The reporter nodded solemnly. Those are wise words, General. Is there anything else you'd like to say to our viewers? I looked at my family one last time, then back at the camera. I want to thank everyone who has supported me throughout my military career. And I want to remind people that true family isn't just about blood relations. It's about the people who stand by you, support your dreams, and celebrate your successes. My phone rang again with the emergency call from the base. I looked at the reporter and said, I'm sorry, but I have to go. My country needs me. As I turned to leave, Jessica made one final desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Beverly, you can't leave. This is my wedding. You're supposed to be here for me. I stopped and looked at her, covered in wedding cake and surrounded by the destruction of her perfect day. Jessica, I've been here for you my entire life. I've paid for your car, your college, your trips, and your wedding. I've sacrificed my own dreams and goals to make yours come true. But I'm done being taken for granted. I walked toward the door, my military colleagues falling into step behind me. As we reached the exit, I turned back one final time. I love you all, but I deserve better than this. I deserve a family that values me and respects what I've accomplished. Until you can do that, I'll be focusing on the people who do appreciate me. The news cameras followed me as I walked out of the reception hall, leaving behind the chaos of Jessica's ruined wedding and my family's shattered illusions. As I got into my car to report for duty, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced in years. The next morning, the story was front-page news in the local paper and had gone viral on social media. The headline read, Local war hero reveals family's shocking treatment at sister's wedding. The video of Jessica's meltdown and my family's ignorance about my military service had been viewed millions of times. My phone was flooded with messages of support from people around the country, praising me for standing up for myself and calling out my family's behavior. Fellow veterans reached out to share their own stories of being undervalued by their families. But the most important message came from my commanding officer, congratulating me on handling the situation with grace and dignity. You've shown the same courage in dealing with your family that you've shown in combat, General Reynolds wrote. That's what true leadership looks like. As for my family, they were forced to face the consequences of their actions. Jessica's wedding became known throughout the town as an example of selfishness and ingratitude. My parents received countless calls from friends and neighbors expressing their shock at how they had treated their war hero daughter. The wedding that was supposed to be Jessica's perfect day became a lesson for everyone about the importance of treating people with respect and recognition. And for me, it became the day I finally stood up for myself and demanded the respect I had always deserved. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you most are the ones who take you for granted the most. But everyone deserves to be valued and appreciated for who they are and what they've accomplished. My military rank didn't just unmask me to my family. It unmasked them to the entire world.